How? If we are in an environment we have to sacrifice ourselves to save people? Are we sincere? Are we expecting a reward? Well, I'm Claresta Irvanti would like to present my thesis analysis entitled Dwarf Sacrifice in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Enlightened Martyr Archetype. So, without any further ado, let's jump into the background of the study.
In a society where the extensions of life is among our most central values, the willingness of martyrs to die or sacrifice their life for a cause makes them ripe for sociological inquiry. Martyr is seen as manipulative adversary, but the history much more virtuous. To be a martyr used to be the one of the most respected position in society. However, the true sacrifice of martyr is a selfless action. The martyr over the freedom, comfort, and life so that others may be redeemed or liberated. Martyrs are often called by some divine source be a god or otherwise that force the martyr into service. Through the support of the higher power of devotion to a love there's value, the martyr is able to keep the suffering. There are two types of martyr, which are shadow martyr and also enlightened martyr. This research focuses to analyze the enlightened martyr, which this study it refers to the core of the martyr archetype is about doing the right thing. This study also explored the enlightened martyr used in the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien as the author. And next, we are talking about the research questions. There are two research questions in this thesis analysis. The first one is how is the dwarf sacrifice as seen in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and the second one is why the dwarf sacrifice called as the enlightened martyr in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Research objective in this thesis is that first to describe the dwarf sacrifice in his willingness for others in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and the second one is to explain the enlightened martyr archetype used in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Use of study. There are two use of study here. The first one is practically. This research is focused on how we have to appreciate the meaning of sacrifice, no matter who you are, where are you from, or even you physically. With the courage that you have can be helpful to many people. The second one is theoretically. This research will be very useful for other researchers to criticize a literary work by using archetype theory by Carl Jung. Scope of study. In the social life, usually the brave one who can fight all the things happen in life. In this trilogy movie, will be found the person who are actually considered weak, and have no influence, who give a very big influence for all people around him. This research to analyze the person who sacrifice himself for other people. And now we move to the chapter 2, theoretical review in a previous study. Here I have 4 previous study. The first one it is memory and sacrifice, an embodied theory of martyrdom by Michaela, James, and also Santa. In this previous study, the result of the research are tangible cultural resources, drawing upon when people need a symbolic object to define, explain a course of actions. Their death and legacy call for social action, militarism, or nationalist identity. And the second previous study here is coming from the influence of Carl Jung archetype of the shadow on early 20th century literature by Dana Brooke 2012. In this previous study, vital to keep our humanity and, as Jung would argue, to become one with ourselves. We must keep our traditions alive, our religion relevant, and our past unified. This previous study research shows that how the martyr itself it is closely related to our social life, religion, and also society. By this research, we also can found or can know that Jung believed in the collective unconsciousness, the threat of losing self was more than an individual problem. This research also carried a deep warning not to get lost in the society, not to become merely a pawn of the modern world. And also, in this uh, in this research, Carl Jung put a quote: "We carry our past with us, the primitive and interior man with his desire and emotions, and it is only with an enormous efforts that we can dictate ourselves from this burden." And the third preview study, it is Autotenetus, the Martyr Self-Formations by Matthew Rekla in 2014. This research or this preview study, it is bring out the theory related to the qualitative difference, qualitative differences of the martyr. By this point, the author gives the explanations that millions die without being attributed the title of martyr. This perhaps give the appearance that it is a date and for extensive analysis. Martyrdom here means to martyr, which is a social in its configurations and toward that. It is refers to the radical individual and in its execution. However, not only that will do. Unintentional death occur regularly. And the last research study or previous study, it is Martyrs and Living Martyrs of the People's War in Nepal by Mary Lecomte and Thelowin. This previous study come up with the issue that related to the people in Nepal, which also related with martyrs. In Nepal, martyrdom stands for the logic, legitimate, and violence. It is the conceptions of war and also death. The ideal of martyr combines all the components, thus a superhero. Carl Jung developed the concept of archetype. Archetype was defined as a component of unconsciousness, which is a Jung development the concept of archetype in 1964. Archetype was defined as a component of collective unconsciousness, which is inborn from the unconscious mind. An enlightened martyr. The core of this martyr is about doing the right thing. The person with this martyr knows that giving and receiving go hand in hand. The martyr knows they have strength to endure where others may not. They also willingly step through with humility and also integrity. The enlightened martyr can see what needs to be done to benefit the whole by making the conscious choice to sacrifice without expectations of anything in return or making anyone feel obligated. Martyr also has a superhuman ability of which she or he can use strength for personal empowerment when faced in situations of opposition that can sacrifice his or her ego and bring out about the finding true self in his or herself and others. The enlightened martyr is the way or he was very able to endure great suffering without becoming embittered by it. Due to this thesis analysis used a movie, so I will bring a theory about the film analysis. There are several things in analyzing movie that is needed to be reviewed for some research subjects. Analyzing a movie is different with other literary work like novel, poetry, and short story. In a movie, we have to pay attention to the image, dialogue, and also actions that display in a movie. When watching film, those aspects will help the audience knowing about the theme of the movie and also how the story goes. Not only those, but also there are some of cinematography focus when the researcher analyzed the movie. According to Box and Petrie in 2008, film analysis requires us in responding the sensitive to the simultaneous and continuous to interplay of image, sound, and movement on the screen. Many aspects in the movie that we can interpret it to analysis. And now we move to the chapter 3, methodology. The first one is about research design. The researcher used qualitative research, which can also be described as an effective model that occurs in natural setting that enables the researchers to develop a level of detail from being highly involved in the actual experience. In this research, the writer used the design of descriptive method, which a method that describes and interprets the object. Data and data source. In this data source, the writer takes the data from trilogy movie. The first one, The Lord of the Rings. The second one is The Fellowship of the Rings, and the third one is The Return of the King. And now it's about the data collecting technique. The writer watched the Lord of the Rings movie. The second one, the writer takes note to get the archetype used by one of the archetype in the movie. And the third one, the writer selects the data to know why the archetype known as Enlightened Martyr. And data analyzing technique. There are 5 of steps in this part. The first one is classifying step. In this step, the researcher spirit and classify the data based on the need in the relations of archetype. The second one is interpreting step. To comprehensive interpretations were done toward the dialogue, picture, characters, and so on. The third one is analyzing step. The researchers will analyze the core of the significance based on the selective theories and also method by analyzing the movie. The fourth is evaluating step. In this part, the researcher will evaluate and review the result of the analysis based on the problem that the author chose. And the last is concluding step. The researcher will conclude the result of the research by showing the result of the analysis. And now we discuss about the important part in the thesis analysis, which discussion. Here there are 2 samples of analysis. The first one, it is from the characteristic of enlightened martyr, which goodness, care, and responsibility. Those are characters of enlightened martyr. People with this archetype will have good personality to the other. While in this part, we can take a look at the scenes analysis. When Gandalf said that you cannot pass the dark will not avail you, go back to the shadow. Then he tried to push the monster with his power until the monster fell down. But then the bridge was broke, and at the moment, Gandalf lifted his staff. The staff broke asunder and fell from his hand. These actions and dialogue prove the sacrifice of Gandalf. Here, he has a responsibility to take care of Frodo until he married, and Gandalf proved it with his sacrifice for Frodo and friends. Not only from Gandalf, but also this responsibility coming from the Aragorn, which, as seen in the scenes while fighting, he's very protective of the hobbits from attack. This Gandalf, who ordered Aragorn to help the hobbits, was one of his reasons. By his sons, this responsibility can be said that Aragorn is also one of the characters who has the character of martyr in the archetype. As the goal of the martyr archetype that state, the martyr can use their great strength for personal empowerment. By Barley, 2012. Means they also need to sacrifice their ego, as Gandalf and Aragorn doing in the movie to help the hobbit. Not only them, but also there's a hobbit or dwarf named Samwise who always taking care of Frodo during the journey and take the responsibility when Gandalf entrusts Frodo to Samwise. Here, the second sample of analysis, which about the still is about the characteristics or the actions of people who have enlightened martyr, which appeases or sacrifice self to self other. So, in this sample of analysis, we directly to the main character's name Frodo sacrificed himself to take the rings, while every character in the movie not brave enough to take the responsibility. As stated in one of the articles that related to the martyr knows they have the strength to endure what the others may not. They willingly stepped into the role with humility and also integrity. It is also related to what happened to Frodo when he was willing himself to take the rings when others not. This scene can be seen in the movie when all the characters come into the Rivendell to discuss who is the right person who will bring the ring to be destroyed. And Frodo ventured to wear the ring and broke it to be destroyed with all the risks involved, sacrificed himself, his own values, his personal dream and aspirations, or even creativity and self-care. So, the dialogue and actions in this movie, well, it starts when everyone meet to discuss who is the one who will bring the rings to be destroyed. Aaron says, "One of you must do this," means take the rings to the fires of Mount Doom to be destroyed. At that time, everyone just keeps silent. They only debate and describe the situations. No one dared to take the rings until Frodo says, "I will take the rings to Mordor." The proof above shows that Frodo maybe felt he was not as great as the man there, but he felt there was a need for him to calm down the commotions and surrender himself with the ring. Frodo didn't know what to expect, but he knew how dangerous it was to carry the rings. But he is still take the responsibility to save people by sacrifice himself. So those are the discussions of my thesis analysis, which answer the research questions when the sample analysis already described the dwarf sacrifice on how the dwarf sacrificed in his willingness for others, and also explain the athlete martyr archetype by shows the characteristic or the actions in sample analysis. And here also the references of my paper. And thank you very much for your nice attention. Good morning.